What is up, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship School's Smart Couple Podcast. I'm your host, Jayson Gaddis, and I'm so glad to be back in the saddle after a little hiatus. Thanks for your patience. If you're new, welcome. We talk all about love, connection, and conflict, and how to get your shit together in an intimate relationship. Because if you are like I used to be, you understand that you can act like a complete jerk or moron when it comes to human connection. You know, you have lots of friends and you're like a great friend, but you get in a relationship and you're really challenging to be around, especially under stress. Okay. Yeah, I'm like that too. Yep. We all are a little weird and activating if we live together and hang out for years. All right. Yeah, it's just the way it is. So we try to help you navigate those turbulent waters. And we also try to help you have a great time because I think marriage kicks ass. I love monogamy. I love partnership. I love family. It's my world. So big fan here. Okay, in this episode, I've got an unbelievable couple named John and Julie Gottman. Really grateful to get this chance to interview them. Just because they're such pioneers in doing research-based relationship work that they just study couples for a living. And they study them by watching videos, they record audios, and they listen to them over and over again to get the data, to mine the data. And their books are full of data if you want to go check that out. So we go over some of their data and fun facts here in this episode, such as, this one was really interesting, the number one reason for breakups and single biggest predictor of relationships ending. This was really interesting. So I'm not going to give it away. You got to listen in. So cool. We get into money. I don't talk a ton about money with guests for some reason, but it's a huge snag that couples get into after years is money. What are we doing? Who are we? What the hell? How can we spend all my money? What the fuck is that credit card bill? Etc. So this is really cool that we dove into money for quite a while. They're big fans of asking questions. And you'll notice in their new book, 8 Dates, it's all about asking questions around different areas when you go on a date. And please, by the way, do date nights. Okay, if you're one of those couples not doing date nights, I'm going to challenge you right now to get your date night on. All right? Ellen and I are going to talk about that soon. People actually live longer who are in great relationships. Okay, they've got the science and research to back that up. We cover that. We talk about good relationships versus not great ones and some of the hallmark distinguishing features and some of the health issues that you have if you can't figure this out. We talk about pregnancy even. We talk about the man and the husband being an important integral role in a successful family. Why is that the case? Well, you're going to find out. Okay, enjoy. I just wanted to quickly mention who they are again. They run the Gottman Institute, and they're incredible. They've been on every TV show. They've been in just about every publication that talks about love and relationships. John's written like 40 books. Julie's co-authored a good portion of those books, and they're both just, leaders in the field. And they speak all the time. They've gotten all kinds of awards. Read their resume on the website if you want more info, because they're incredible, right? Okay, let's dive right in to the Gottmans. Enjoy. All right, welcome to the show, John Gottman and Julie Schwartz Gottman.
Thanks so much, Jayson. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really honored. I mean, you guys are legends in the love and relationship space, so it's a real treat to get to chat with you.
Thank you.
At least legends in our own mind. That's good.
Well, you guys, I got to say, you guys have done so much to move the conversation forward with all the research you've done and the amount of couples you've interviewed and worked with and the books you've published. And so the Gottman Institute, it's all really, really amazing and such a great resource. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know you guys have a new book out called 8 Dates. We're going to get into that a little bit on this interview. I'm really intrigued. I've been reading it, so I've got some questions for you. But
Okay.
before we get started, just for our listeners, they might be new to the Gottmans and they might not know you very well. So give us just a little background of who are you and how did you get into this work around love and relationships?
Okay. Well, John, my beautiful, wonderful husband, started doing this research on couples. What predicts whether couples stay together or divorce or stay together unhappily? He did that with a fantastic colleague named Dr. Robert Levinson, and they started that work in 1972. A long
When I was
time ago.
born. Wow. Yep.
Yeah.
Before most of us were born.
And Bob and I were kind of clueless about love relationships. We sort of went from one disaster with a woman to another.
This is
Yep,
before
I know
I
that.
came along.
That's
Yeah, of
right.
course.
Before Julie came along. That's right. So we thought, since we don't know anything about relationships, let's study them. And let's bring in couples to a lab where we can synchronize their physiology with the video time code that we're using to videotape them. So we could see where in the conversation was their blood flowing fast, their heart beating fast, were they getting really emotionally, physiologically upset? And how did that influence the interaction?
Mm-hmm.
So they just talked about how their day went after being apart for 8 hours. They talked about an area of conflict in their relationship and a positive topic. And when I moved to the University of Washington, just before I met Julie, and we started dating, I built an apartment laboratory, and Julie helped me actually design it. And we studied 130 newlywed couples in that lab and followed them for a decade as they had babies, and the babies grew up. So we really got started doing research before we even began clinical work together.
Yeah, that's right. I was a clinical psychologist, and John and I met in Seattle in 1986, I think.
Right.
And I was in private practice. John was a professor doing this research. And after about 9 years or so, 8 years, something like that, we were sitting in a canoe out in the Salish Sea. And I had a background of helping the most distressed people out there, people who were traumatized or who even had psychotic disorders, people who had struggles with addiction and so on. So I'd been doing that for a number of years.
She was a real therapist.
Got it.
Sweetheart.
Yep.
And so John and I were just having a lovely day in the canoe. And I said, we ought to use this stuff to help people. It's crazy that it's just sitting in there in the ivory tower. And so we began to develop interventions together and test those and study those. And they were based not on our wisdom. We are not gurus by a long shot.
Right.
They were based on how the couples succeeded in their relationships that John had been studying for decades. So we created exercises and interventions that were based on what these couples were doing to succeed in their relationships. And sure enough, they worked. It was really amazing. They worked for us too.
Wow.
That was 23 years ago.
Right.
Okay.
So we have been refining those and sharing those in all kinds of different ways ever since. That's been a joyous opportunity for us.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. And what was like back in those experiments, was there anything that was kind of surprising that worked?
Surprising that worked. Well, one of the things that was surprising, first of all, one of the findings is that we discovered, John really discovered this, that 69% of all problems couples struggle with are perpetual issues. They never go away. So when he was bringing couples back into the lab every 2 or 3 years, the only thing that changed in their conflict discussions were their hairstyles and fashions. Everything else was pretty much identical.
80% stability over time.
Right.
Wow.
Studying couples as long as 20 years.
Wow.
Isn't that something? Right. And so we saw in the successful couples that the way that couples really move through time, having those perpetual issues, is they learned how to dialogue with each other in such a way that they understood the heart of each person's position on the issue. And they did that by asking each other very deep questions and then really listening to those answers and understanding where their partner was coming from. That was one of the most beautiful interventions.
So, Jayson, a lot of couples argue about money. And what Julie and I discovered was that most of the time, those arguments aren't about money. They're about what money means, the importance of money, the history of money in a person's family. And, I sat down with 900 arguments that people had about money.
My God.
And from those arguments, I was able to really, deduce 100 different meanings of money. Money could mean power, competence, success, love, caring, justice, all kinds of things. And so when we got people talking, not so much about resolving their money conflicts, but about money meant to each of them personally, they could hear each other's wishes and dreams and hopes around money. Then they got to really, questions like, how much money is enough? What are we making money for? What are we hoping for? What gives life meaning? And how does money fit into that picture? And suddenly they could hear each other. Instead of being clashing about these gridlock conflicts, suddenly they could really come to a compromise about them. At least understand each other's position.
That's amazing. So if I kind of take away a question there, if I'm listening and I have a money issue with my partner, it's like look for the deeper meaning about what money represents.
Right. So we have 6 questions that they can ask about that. And,
and I think you've got that.
Get at these deep.
You've got this in the new book, right? In terms of
one
of the dates is a money date.
Right. The money date gets at that.
Okay, great. And what's one question, just to kind of give us a teaser?
How was money dealt with in your family growing up?
Yeah, great. That's huge. I mean, that alone could spark so many cool conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, there was one couple I worked with, for example, where, they had met in college, and they were each the first of their family to go to college, and what they had in common was they each had fathers who were kind of dreamers, and visionaries, but they were very unsuccessful with money. So they had a legacy of failure in their families with money. And in working with them, this wife designed a family crest that was their own ideas about success and money. And they put it over their fireplace. And they created this together. They actually created it out of wood. And it was their values about money, what money meant and why it was important, what was enough, and what they were striving for. So they were able to create kind of a new legacy starting out that changed their history of failure with money.
Oh, that's really powerful. And I'm almost hearing also that if we don't do a new money conversation and we actually get honest about it, we might just be deferring to whatever was done before.
Right. Good point.
The other thing, too, is that a lot of people will have conflicts, and the way they talk about it is superficial. So they'll talk about how the money is being spent or how much is getting saved and so on. But it's rare for people to dive deeper down into what money means to you. It can mean freedom. It can mean power. It can mean joy, it can mean fear, it can mean all kinds of things. And it isn't until people really unlock the secrets of what the conflict issue means to them, can they really understand the other person's point of view and build compromise with compassion.
Yeah. And Julie, how do you get at that in terms of, I'm hearing like the deeper motives there? Like, what are some of the things either you do or that a couple could do to get at that deeper level conversation?
Well, we actually include this exercise in one of our chapters in the book around conflict. It's called the Dream Within Conflict exercise, and it poses 6 questions that one partner can ask the other and then really listen to the answers. And the questions are things like, what is your history or childhood experience regarding this issue? Or is there an underlying purpose to your position on this issue? Another one is, are there some ethics or beliefs or values that inform your position on this issue? So, they are questions specifically designed for one partner to say to the other partner and then listen to the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. I noticed that in your work, from the books that I've read and scanned and just what I've read about you and listened to you, it seems like questions are actually really important. And I'm curious, why is that? Like, are people not able to develop these questions and follow their own curiosity on their own? Like, what's going on here?
Well, here's what's happening. First of all, people are so incredibly busy that they are focused on getting through the list of things they have to do every day. Does that give them time to reflect on their beliefs, on their dreams,
Right.
on their values? Often it does not. And even if they have time for that, do they talk to one another? Well, often they don't, right?
In fact, there was a study done at UCLA and the Sloan Center where they put cameras and microphones in the homes of 30 dual career couples, young couples with children. And they found that in a typical evening, partners spent less than 10% of their evening in the same room. And they talked to each other an average of 35 minutes a week.
Whoa.
And most of that conversation was about who's going to do what when, who's going to pick up the kids, who's going to do the grocery
logistics.
shopping and so on.
Right.
Yeah. So they weren't going out on these dates, and they were living their lives like 2 railroad tracks running side by side, but never touching. So these dates would really enrich a relationship.
That's what we really wanted in terms of this book. So each chapter of the book focuses on a particular set of questions.
Yep.
For example, a chapter on trust and commitment. What does trust mean to you? How was trust shown in your family, or lack of trust shown in your family? What does commitment mean to you, etc.? So each chapter creates a conversation by one partner asking the other questions, and again, really listening to the answers. And the questions are designed for people to understand not only what's on the surface, but what's below that surface as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, and just to, again, for the listener, in their new book, which is out today, so by the time you listen to this, it'll be out. You can get it on Amazon or wherever. Some of the themes here that they talk about, there's 8 dates, right? So we've got trust and commitment, family, conflict, fun and adventure, sex and intimacy, growth and spirituality, work and money, and dreams. So these are, to me, lovely categories that couples can get into and just really dive deep with these questions that you guys bring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually had 300 couples go on these dates and record them. So I got to listen to 2,400 dates.
Wow.
There are gay couples and lesbian couples and heterosexual couples, all kinds of couples that went on these dates. 37% of them were really new relationships, but 63%, the majority, were long-term relationships that, wound up going on these 8 dates and really sort of reinvigorating curiosity about one another.
Mm. And what were I guess what were some of the other insights from 300 couples doing this work and these exercises?
What we discovered
Yep.
was that in these listening to these dates, that they got very deep with one another very quickly and started talking about really important things to each of them, and really understanding differences between them and appreciating those differences.
Mm. Yeah.
But what did you learn, Julie, about these dates?
Well, we learned that some were duds. We started with 12 dates, and one of the things that we were asking these couples is which date really felt exciting to you and which date did not, which date felt really awful, and things like work-life balance, which I would have thought to be something really enthusiastic for folks. Nope, it wasn't.
Boring.
It was boring for them. They didn't want to talk about it. And so, we kind of gave it our best shot with that first 12 dates. And these couples really helped guide us to the 8 dates that felt most meaningful, that felt richest for them.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. I love how you guys continue to learn with the research, right? As you go here.
That's right.
So cool.
One of the things, Jayson, that I've been finding now that I think makes one of the dates so important is that I've been analyzing data from 40,000 couples about to begin couples therapy, and 80% of them really say that fun and playfulness and adventure are gone in their relationship.
Mm.
And I think that's so sad. It really doesn't have to happen. It's part of what makes courtship so much fun is that we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy being silly together. We enjoy playing, exploring new things, traveling together, having adventures. And yet, it just goes away for 80% of the couples that we studied. So that date on play, fun, and adventure turns out to be a very important date, I think.
Oh, absolutely. That's great. And what would you say is the reason, if you had to speculate or from your homework you've done over there, why is it that fun goes out the window?
It's just that career and children just crowd it out.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things involved. One is that, it's only 10 years ago that we went through the Great Recession or Depression. And as a result, people have felt tremendous economic pressure, leading to many more people going back into the workforce, dual career couples struggling sometimes even there to pay the rent. So people working so very, very hard and struggling with economic insecurity. So as a result, they're not thinking about fun. They're thinking about how to pay our rent. And if we can't pay our rent, how can we possibly afford to go do something fun? Because lots of fun things cost money, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of them don't.
Right.
And, that's part of what people can discover when they address the questions that are in the chapter in our book on fun and adventure.
Yeah, cool. Do you guys think there's anything to do with also just technology and screens that we often just, you see couples at the airport or at a restaurant both just kind of staring at their phones? Is that because that's a newer phenomenon? You guys have been around long enough to see so many changes in the way we are with each other. Is that a big factor here?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Lots and lots of people in their spare time are doing social networking or, they're on Facebook, they're on something, they're looking at their email, which is a passive activity for the most part.
Yep.
You're sitting, you're doing nothing, you're staring at a screen, you're not talking to your partner, you're not being with your partner. I mean, I'm sure you, along with many of your audience, have seen in restaurants, a table of people, and they're all on their phones, and nobody is talking to each other.
Yeah.
It's the most bizarre phenomenon.
It really is.
And so some of them are actually talking to each other on their phones.
Yeah.
as opposed to face to face.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like, what? What the heck? So, so you're right. I think that does really block people from going out and experiencing the world and each other and enjoying doing so.
Yeah. Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
you guys,
text and email just really not a good medium for emotional communication. Really doesn't work very well, even with emojis.
yeah, that's right. I mean, nothing replaces the face-to-face, skin-to-skin, right?
Right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
It's pretty huge.
Yeah. Cuddling is very important in relationships.
Oh, completely. Can we talk about attachment for a minute?
Sure.
What's your guys' take on attachment? All the research and neuroscience around, our formative years and early years, and now impacting it. I noticed, in the book, say 8 Dates, you're not getting too much into that, obviously, because you've written other books that include that. But I'm curious, what, after all these years and with the attachment research changing, and really being pretty new in the grand scheme of things, in terms of adult attachment, what is your just kind of general understanding there, or I guess teaching there?
I think that attachment theory is really very important. And part of the data on trust is really talking about how do you make the relationship safe? How do you create a secure bond? And clearly that's very important. In our data on what's an ideal family and what do you want this family to be like, a lot of couples talked about the wounds that they brought from childhood, the ways in which their parents never showed them they were proud of them, or their parents never really came to their events, or never expressed love very well, never expressed affection very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people are really talking about some of these attachment injuries that they are bringing into the relationship that affect the quality of the relationship itself. So that's a very important conversation about these early wounds that have been created in so many of our couples. And how can they really heal those? How can they create a culture in which attachment can be secure, in which they can really rely on and trust their partner and heal some of these things that have come out of childhood? People have come from families where fathers were disrespectful and contemptuous. There's been violence, there's been drinking and alcoholism, violence between parents, and they've seen all of this. And it has a big effect on their relationship. So the data on what should a family be a lot of times addresses some of those questions about attachment and security.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me also add that, at the base of relationships is our need for connection. To be attached to another person. And so the attachment work, the attachment research, and so on is very, very important, wonderful in terms of our understanding whether or not we feel safe enough to be open and to be vulnerable with the partner, and how we build trust, how we build commitment. But what we have also seen in John's research is working on attachment is not enough. That's just a part of what creates a good relationship. There is much more that has to be dealt with, especially when couples are distressed. For example, all of John's research on physiology is very, very important.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody can feel securely attached and have a secure attachment in their background. But at the same time, if they get physiologically flooded, that is, it's very easy for them to go into fight or flight so that they really are incognizant of the words that are coming out of their mouth, the looks on their faces, that they are flashing with rage and saying things that they later very much regret. Physiological flooding is often the culprit in that, because it leads us to disconnect from the part of ourselves in our brain that can listen well, that can really process what our partner is saying and generate responses that are calm and gentle. Instead, we just hear attack no matter what the other person is saying. So if a person has a tendency to get physiologically flooded, that's going to be a problem. Other problems have to do with how do you bring up your complaints? Do you bring them up with criticism, or do you bring them up by describing yourself, your own feelings, your own needs, and not describe the flaws of your partner? Well, that makes a huge difference. So how you communicate, no matter what your attachment style is pivotal, and learning the ways that can be successful in your relationships.
Yeah, nice. And facial expression, tone of voice, you're talking about when you talk about like the physiology stuff, right? Face getting flushed, furrowed eyebrows, the kind of vibe, the body language that we're portraying to our partner.
Right.
Out of all of those, because you guys have done so much research here and watching faces, out of all those, is one the most important in terms of eyes, face, tone of voice, any of that?
Probably the most important one is contempt. And that's a best single predictor of relationship breakup. Really communicating disrespect. There is a facial expression of contempt that involves pulling the left lip corner to the side and creating an unflattering dimple and rolling your eyes. Sort of that communication that, you're an idiot, which you can do non-verbally in under half a second.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
can really destroy not only the relationship, but also your partner's immune system and create degradations in immune functioning. So yeah, that's an important facial expression. The opposite is shared humor. So when people really can laugh together, laugh at themselves, and it reduces physiological arousal and communicates a kind of camaraderie and, of course, a safety in interaction as well. Humor is just very powerful.
Okay, I want to ask a question and make sure I get this. Contempt, did you say that it's the number one reason for people splitting up or relationships not working?
It's the single best predictor of relationship breakup.
Wow.
Is that contempt is alive in the relationship. So people are putting each other down, humiliating each other, in public often, just communicating they think their partner is an idiot, stupid, and they can sometimes do this almost unconsciously, not realizing,
of course,
that they're not just disagreeing, but they're really acting superior to their partner and putting their partner, belittling their partner. And living with that kind of belittling is a very dangerous thing for people's health.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And what is driving the contempt often in your experience? Is it just unfinished business? We haven't actually had the hard conversations. We don't know how to work through conflict. So we start to build up resentment. Like what is it that drives that contentment?
That's a really great question. I think one of the things is what we call turning away or turning against. And here's what that means. When one person makes a bid for connection, or just a small thing, it can be, hey, look at that beautiful boat out the window. And the other person either ignores them or responds against them by saying something like, well, stop interrupting me. I'm trying to read. That experience over and over and over again of being turned away from creates first loneliness, maybe some anxiety. Then it begins to create anger. Then it begins to create bitterness. And the bitterness, I think, is what generates the contempt.
Yeah, that's intense. And John, you mentioned the health piece. Will you guys say more, just another piece about the health? Why is this so damaging to our health? Like what's happening in the body and the physiology?
Well, a couple of psychologists have studied this, Ron and Kiko Glazer at Ohio State University. And instead of taking physiological measures like Bob Levinson and I did, and we do in our lab now, they took small drops of blood from people as they were talking, again studying newlywed couples. And they discovered that the amount of cortisol and adrenaline, which are our two stress hormones, the more they secrete in the conversation, the more they're able to predict that divorce is going to happen 10 years later, 10 years after the wedding. And Ron Glaser was an immunologist, so he studied the white blood cells, the T cells, the B cells, the natural killer cells, the macrophages, the parts of the immune system that are in our blood. And it turns out that, contempt and criticism and these ways of denigrating your partner and trying to turn your partner into you and not accepting your partner create cortisol and adrenaline. And that process degrades, in a wide spectrum sense, the functioning of the immune system. So natural killer cells, which are designed to police against tumors, are not as effective at doing it when you have this means of communication, this pattern. We call it the four horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So those things act to make the immune system function worse. So contempt is an index of that, and that is what makes people sick over time. In fact, in a great relationship, there's evidence that people live between 10 and 15 years longer than in a relationship that's distressing, that's characterized by the four horsemen. So that's the way we think it works, is through the immune system degradation.
Wow. So powerful to get these connections, right? And you'd think that would motivate people. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, right.
I also read in your book, in your new book, that after all 3,000 couples, basically, you could predict which couples were going to make it and which weren't just by how they treated each other in the session. And those that were positive and respected each other and showed general respect would make it. And the people that had negativity, a lot of negativity going on, or disrespect in the sessions, wouldn't make it. I thought that was
right.
really insightful,
Mm-hmm.
really powerful.
Yeah, it wasn't, it's not insight, it's science, really.
Right.
It's the sadness of following these couples for so long and seeing what would happen, to the point where we could predict by just watching couples for 15 minutes, what would happen 6 years down the road with about 94% accuracy, which meant that we stopped getting invitations to dinner.
Yeah. One thing, Jayson, that blew my mind was, I predicted, most of the time I've been wrong in my predictions. I've kept track of my hypotheses. I'm wrong 60% of the time. So I got to really look at the data. Now, I thought in a great relationship, just based on the crummy relationships I had before I met Julie, that if people were as nice to one another as they were mean to one another, that would balance it out. But what I discovered was that in a great relationship, that ratio of positive to negative was 5 to 1 on average. Not, 1 to 1 characterized a bad relationship. And my relationships, it was a lot more like 0.5 to 1, just 4 times as much negativity as positivity. And but in the masters of relationships, what Bob and I were finding was that ratio, even during conflict, was 5 times as much of being nice to one another, interested in one another, kindness, generosity, compared to criticism, defensiveness, and those other things.
Yeah.
That kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, completely. And that's really helpful, I think, for the listener to hear 5 to 1. Like that's kind of a good rule of thumb then. If I'm in a marriage and I'm, 50-50, I want to turn that around. I want to be more positive than negative, obviously.
Right.
And mind you, it's 5 to 1 during a conflict discussion. During non-conflict time, it's 20 to 1.
Right.
Wow. Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want your relationship to work, you really have to be kind and pleasant and generous and honest with your partner and be interested in your partner, how your partner's feeling, what your partner needs. So that's the work in relationships.
Yeah. I want to rewind here before we wind down, and just talk about your relationship a little bit. Now, you guys have been married how long?
Almost 32 years.
Okay. And is this first marriage, second marriage for you guys, or?
Second.
Okay. And 32 years. And kids? No kids?
We have one.
One kid.
Okay. And
one daughter.
Okay, awesome. So 32 years. How many years, just to give the listeners perspective, did it take you guys to kind of go, oh, we kind of got it. We still have challenges. We still fight sometimes or still disagree. but we now know how to do this well. Like, was that a pretty fast learning for you, or did it take a decade to get there, or what?
Well, first of all, it took us a while to figure out, we hadn't done the intervention research, hadn't done all of the analyses and so on when we first met. So we were as clumsy at it as anybody else, bringing our own baggage in and all kinds of stuff. But once we started figuring out what the successful couples were doing, we're all in the same soup, right? So nobody gets it right all the time. And we would still have our fights. We'd still have our ups and downs. We would still get defensive, and we still do to this day.
Yeah.
So,
but we were there.
When did we get it? We never got it. We're still working at it, right? Let's be real here. But, from the very beginning, I think we knew that we were going to stay together for life. Right. And that we didn't have to be perfect to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so
big.
Well said.
It's one of the things that we say to our audiences, which is, go for the good enough relationship.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect. Good enough is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough on your answer there. And how did you guys meet? Like, I'm just curious. I always like to get, especially a couple like you that's been at it for a while. How did that happen? How long was the courtship?
Well, we don't go into a lot of detail around that typically.
Fair enough.
But John had just moved from the University of Illinois. I had just moved from graduate school in San Diego. And we met about 6 months after we both moved to Seattle.
We met in a coffee house that's no longer there.
Right.
Called the Pony Espresso.
Yeah,
and I was having coffee, and she walked in. And I got up and said, "Would you like to join me for a cup of coffee?" And she said, "Why not?"
Wow.
That was it.
And 5 months later, he proposed.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It is very cool.
Yep.
It is very cool.
Wow.
I loved the way she looked, and I loved talking to her. So it happened pretty fast.
It did happen really fast. Yeah, it was really wonderful. I fell in love with John in part because of his car. He had this really old, terrible car. It was an old American car that had lived in the Midwest, so it was covered with Bondo, white patches of Bondo, which you deal with body rust in a car with white patches of Bondo.
Yeah, my car was voted the ugliest car in the University of Washington's parking lot.
Wow, you won that award. That's pretty impressive.
Isn't that great? I loved his car. It had Naugahyde seats, and it was just, it had one of the bench seats, in the front. It was way before they had bucket seats.
It just ran and ran and ran.
It was a great car. I loved it. And so I had to keep dating John in order to keep getting rides in his car.
Okay, cool. That's great. And do you guys, how important have date nights been for you over the years in raising a child? And do you still do like a weekly date night or a monthly date night, or?
Yeah, really important to us. And we used to, when we first had a baby, we would dress up and go to this wonderful hotel in Seattle called the Sorrento Hotel, which had a great lobby. And we would pretend to be guests in the hotel. Uh-huh. And we'd commandeer this couch and order a glass of wine and just sit there all night in front of their fireplace and just talk to each other and ask these open-ended questions of one another. So
right. And John would always bring a yellow notepad, and he'd be taking notes on my answers. And I knew I was in big trouble. I had to be very careful because my stories might end up in one of his books in the future.
Right.
So I had to be extremely careful.
That's so funny.
About what I said. It was fun, though. It was
about 20 years, we started a tradition in our relationship that we call our annual honeymoon. So this will be the 20th year this summer that we'll have gone to the same bed and breakfast and rented the same room. And we bring our kayak up there and we kayak and, and we sit and talk to each other for about 2 weeks. And we turn off our cell phones, turn off everything electronic, and just ask each other 3 questions. What was great about last year? What sucked about last year? And what do you want next year to be like? And it takes us 2 weeks to answer those questions.
Wow. That's so sweet. Those are some good notes there for you listeners.
That's our ultimate date night.
Right. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Date retreat. That sounds really great. That's funny about the notepad, because my wife and I, when we go on dates, I'll often whip out my phone and I'll say, hold on, honey, I got to write this down. Maybe I should take a yellow notepad.
Is she careful? Is she careful about it?
I don't know. I got to ask her. I don't think so, but maybe she is and I'm not noticing.
Great.
That's
Well,
great.
For you.
Well, taking notes is important. Yeah.
It is for me. Like, it's funny when I'm with my wife and we're really in a zone, especially on a date night, just this amazing creativity starts to happen between us. And I get all these amazing downloads and ideas. And I'm like, hold on, like, this is amazing. And I'm like, I wish we had a recorder right now. Of course, it's better that we don't, because then it would change. But it's really special.
Wonderful.
That
That's
sounds
great.
great.
Oh,
Good for
yeah.
you.
Yeah, thanks.
Wonderful.
Okay, so as we wind down, I have 2 more questions. Well, 3. One question is, contempt being one of the biggest reasons that people split up. Then is the opposite true, that the biggest reason people stay together is because they respect each other? Like, what would you say is the biggest reason people stay in it?
Absolutely. It's so important. It's, we studied these newlywed couples for a decade. We found that in the couples who got pregnant in their final trimester of pregnancy, the way they talked to each other predicted what that baby was going to be like, how much that baby was going to laugh and cry, how much that baby could self-soothe. And then one of my graduate students, Alison Shapiro, said, I wonder if we went back to the tapes that you collected just a couple of months after the wedding, whether we could predict which couples went through the pregnancy period in a positive way. And she absolutely could. And the key thing was the man, how the husband was respectful to his wife. That was the key ingredient. And in fact, we wrote another book earlier with Doug Abrams and Dr. Rachel Carlton Abrams called A Man's Guide to Women. And it was based on this idea that husbands were so important in that research, and communicating respect to their wives was a critical dimension of going through the family really easily and having that baby turn out happy, able to self-soothe, and being a well-adjusted baby.
Can I also add that, and it's part of the reason why we wrote this book, another big contributor to success is curiosity. That is, curiosity about who your partner is and how your partner is changing over time. So, we can be together for decades, but are we continuing to follow our partner's evolution? Are we finding out how they're feeling here and now, given, the political climate? Are we finding out what dream has popped into their mind that they really want to live in the future? Has their sense of spirituality changed over time? How has having children changed their point of view about life and death? Right?
Yeah.
So there are these beautiful questions that it's so important for partners to continue to ask each other. We keep thinking we just need to broadcast. We don't necessarily ask questions of each other, but that is so not true. And that is why we wrote this book, 8 Dates, to give people the opportunity to ask those questions of one another and connect with one another at a much deeper level and learn how important it is to ask those questions and continue to do so over the decades to come.
Yeah, so great.
The 8 Dates are a crash course in curiosity.
Yeah, I'm really getting that, especially with you guys and your questions. They're so helpful because there's so many of them, and it's just like over and over asking the important questions of who is this person and how do they relate to their past and their relationship to money and so on. Really great. Okay,
you.
so my last couple of questions here are, if I started this organization called the Relationship School, and I'm on a mission to try to get this type of information to younger and younger people because we didn't get this stuff formally taught to us, right? It wasn't in high school. There was no relationship class in college for me. And so we're testing some relationship classes with high schools. Right now we're in 3 schools. We want to do a training for teachers and educators. And to me, emotional intelligence is important, but I feel like this interpersonal intelligence is really important. And if I were to speak in front of, say, 1,000 high school students, and you could whisper in my ear and you could only tell me to tell them one thing, what would you tell them?
Treat each other with respect. Treat each other as if that person is your ally, not your enemy. How about you, John?
That's good. I think what I would say is that you have to have a different attitude about negative emotions. You have to have a different attitude about your partner's sadness, your partner's disappointment, your partner's anger with you, and realize that those moments are magic moments for connecting. So that in great relationships, people seem to have a motto that when you're upset, honey, the world stops and I listen. And that's what I would pick as the one thing. But I think respect is very important too. I think that's a great insight, Julie.
Yeah, those are both huge. Okay, great. We'll put those in our notes. Thank you. All right, and this book, 8 Dates, is out. Where can people find the Gottmans and 8 Dates?
Well, 8 Dates is everywhere. It's in bookstores. It's on Amazon. It's at our institute. And our website for all of our workshops, books, products, therapists, pretty much everything you could ask for relationships is www.gottman.com.
All right. Thanks, guys, for your time. That's, again, just beautiful. And I'm psyched to keep going on the book here and share this with our community.
Great.
Really.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And I hope, if I'm ever in Seattle, I'd love to, is there like a Gottman Institute? I can come knock on your door and hang out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. With the research lab as well.
We're on 4th Street.
Okay.
Yep, right downtown Seattle.
Awesome. Okay.
So please visit. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Okay. Thanks, guys. Again, appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. See ya. All right, pretty cool, right? The Gottmans. All I can say is wow. How about Contempt? Ooh, that one stung. I was like, oh man, Contempt. Most of us know that feeling either when someone has contempt for us or we have contempt for them. And that, my friends, is a big deal breaker. So look out for that. Please don't get to that place in your marriage or long-term relationship where one of you is feeling contempt, because it's going to be hard to recover from that. All right. I thought it was really interesting too that the 5-to-1 ratio, positive and negative in a good relationship, 20-to-1 during non-conflict times. Like, there was just some really cool fun facts for me. Getting the man to respect his wife. I mean, geez. And then curiosity, of course. Money, that was cool. So there's lots of action steps here. Primarily, I want you to do 2 things. Make sure you go to Gottman.com, and that's where the Gottman Institute is, okay? Just go check out their website. Check them out. They have tons of blogs, trainings, books, you name it. They got it. It's very cool. I aspire the relationship school to be like the Gottman Institute someday. We're just getting warmed up here, so may it be so one day. And we'll be different because we're not a research-based institute. yet. We may be, who knows? Anyway, I'm really inspired by these characters. Okay, so check them out. And then another action step is, and also go buy their book, 8 Dates. And another action step is start being curious and asking more interesting, in-depth questions, especially if you're stuck in your partnership. Okay? If you want templates for those questions, just buy their book. But I think that's huge. Okay, that was kind of one of the takeaways here is how powerful it can be to reignite a relationship if you can ask really important questions. When you lose your curiosity, that means nothing about you being like not curious. It just means your curiosity is a little buried under some resentments or some hurt or some pain or some distance, some shutdownness. It's okay. You are a curious human being though. Okay, tap into that. Start asking better questions of your partner or friends. All right. You'll take it deeper. You'll take the conversation deeper. Nice. And then also just a couple announcements, reminders coming up. We have, I'm doing a mini workshop here at the Yoga Pod in Boulder, March 9th. And then March 22nd, around there, I'm doing an event called Transforming Conflicts into Love at Kripalu. Kripalu is a beautiful yoga meditation retreat center in Western Massachusetts. So if you live on the East Coast, this is a no-brainer to attend. All right, just Google Jayson Gaddis, Kripalu, and you'll see it, find it. You can sign up. It's probably going to be one of the most affordable events I do of the year. If you live on the East Coast, you must attend this. If you don't, it's okay, but it's going to cost you that much more to come out to Boulder, buy plane tickets, get lodging, and then sign up for an event, which is going to cost more than Kripalu here. So I'm encouraging you, meet me in Kripalu. It'd be fun to meet in person, all right, and go deep. Okay, we'll include that link in the show notes as well. All right, everybody, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your phone. Leave us a review on iTunes and share with one friend what you're learning here. Just share it with the podcast. Just scroll through an episode. Hey, check out this one. Okay. And thank you again for being such awesome listeners and human beings. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right. Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend. All right. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them. So thank you.